plans I made, though, because I'm going to be talking about what is it like to be a writer. And it's like I said, it kind of makes me feel like an asshole still to say like I am a writer, and I think that's because we have kind of a messed up way of uh defining a lot of these terms. Like you don't need to be a famous person in order to define yourself as a creator. You don't need to be making tons of money at it. Um, I feel like if you write, and this is what I tell people if they're like not like, oh, I'm not really a musician, I'm not really a writer, I'm not really an artist. If you write, if you draw, then you are that thing, that verb with an R at the end of it. If you write, it doesn't matter what it is, you write a poem a week, you wrote a poem last month and you're really proud of it, you know, whatever it is. If you write, then you are a writer. If you don't write, you are not a writer. And that's going out to all my homies out there who don't read, don't talk to other people about books, don't put a damn word down, and still talk about how they're gonna write the next great American novel. I mean, I know a lot of people who try really hard to sound like they're well read, and it's like, one, it's fine to just read for fun. Read a damn comic book. I'm obsessed with comic books. And like, I'm also obsessed with classic literature. It's all amazing storytelling. So people who are snobs about what they read are awful. And I used to be like that. I was very much like that kid in high school. It was like, everyone I know is reading Twilight, but I am reading Jane Austen. And it's like, well, okay. It doesn't make you better than anyone. It just makes it so you don't know how to talk to anybody. And when you get to college, professors are going to be like, why the fuck are you trying to spell like you're in the UK, you poser. So, and I did read Twilight, and I did like it at the time because it is specifically geared to make 14-year-old girls swoon. And it is very hard to resist the swoon. You can consciously be like, Twilight is dumb, but then you read it and you're like, parts of this would be nice. This would be nice to have. I'm 14, I don't understand healthy boundaries. This sounds ace. So, people who are snobs about what they read are the worst, but the very, very, very worst are people who don't read but act like they're super well read. Okay, I know people are busy. I get it. And I know you want to impress people, but just don't be a poser about it. And these are some of the best tricks that I have found people using, and that I probably used quite a bit in college to act like I've read everything so people would, you know, think I was an impressive 19-year-old. But here are a couple ways that you can pretend to be super well read without actually reading anything. Number one, instead of saying, I didn't read whatever book it is, it's too long, say, I didn't finish whatever book it is, it's full of gratuitous filler. That implies that you definitely could have finished Moby Dick, but you chose not to, for aesthetic reasons. I, side note about Moby Dick, so there's a lot of effed up quotes. I have not read it, and because I just don't have time for it. I just don't have time for that. But one of the quotes from Moby Dick is, I know not all that may be coming, but be it what it will, I'll go to it laughing. Now, big thing in Moby Dick is that people go effing insane trying to hunt down this whale. So this phrase is about losing your fucking mind. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, tell me. But I can only assume from what little I know about Moby Dick, this phrase is about losing your fucking mind while hunting a whale. And I saw this quote on a print for a children's room. It was like in cute, like curly, I may not know all that may be coming, but be what it will, I'll go to it laughing. And has like a smiling whale on the picture. You have missed the point of Moby Dick. This is a person who was in a staff design meeting, and they were like, "We need ideas to go on children's walls." And this guy was like, had just finished lying to someone about how he read Moby Dick, like in college or something. And people were like, and he's like, gotta back up his lie. And so he just boldly, like, Googles a quote real quick and, like, makes a design. Like, this is not, you should not be encouraging your child to single mindedly go after one of God's most beautiful creatures and murder it with your last dying breath and chuckle as you do it. I don't know, maybe you want to teach your child perseverance, and this seems like the right story to do it. You know, to each their own. I don't have kids. I don't know what the hell you should do with them. Number 2, to appear very well read. If someone asks if you've read a specific book and you haven't, say it's not in your milieu. Right? That means that you're rejecting it socially instead of rejecting it in favor of Disney Plus. Number 3 is how you do 3 in sign language. I'm not just pretending to be foreign like I am with the way I spell things. Describe small tasks as the hero's journey. Did you go to the store at a busy time? Well, then you accomplished the hero's journey. You're basically Odysseus. Don't worry, I'll talk about who Odysseus is in a second. If you haven't read the Odyssey, that's fine too. It's pretty neat. There are other things I could have read that probably would have made me more likable. I do not begrudge people who have not read the Odyssey. Number 4, compare yourself with Odysseus. So he's a guy who went on a really long trip and then he left his wife to handle everything on her own. And he cheated on her a bunch, but for some reason she's supposed to stay faithful to him, and that's like the whole like big crux is can he get home in time before she finds a new boyfriend? I mean, I guess it's from like ancient Greece or whatever, so I probably shouldn't. I don't know. Do you begrudge pastimes for sexism? That's a question for you to answer. I do. I feel like I figured it out. Other people figured it out. It wasn't handed to The idea of equality wasn't handed to us by aliens. Somebody probably could have said, this seems wrong. Yeah, so if you want to seem like Odysseus, just like next time you go for a long drive, just shout boldly, like Odysseus, we struggle onward before you start driving. Um, and people will assume that you just really know things. You don't even know if I actually read the book. I could have just read some Wikipedia stuff. Is this whole bit gonna read as like a humble brag about what I've actually read? Because if so, it's working perfectly. Uh, Number 5, respond to requests with, I would prefer not to. This is from a short story about a guy who just decides to stop doing things. I love that shit in high school. It's about existentialism and like, why do stuff? He's a folk hero for people who don't have to work to feed themselves. So you can use his catchphrase to up your cachet. The 6th way to appear well read without having to read anything is to vocally refuse to read popular books. So by avoiding books and repeatedly telling people you avoid them, you'll appear even smarter with no work. You can avoid whole genres like this. You can avoid sci-fi, romance, historical fiction. You can just dismiss beautiful swaths of history and novel and all sorts of forms and totally let that boost your ego. You can. It's a choice. Definitely a choice I made in high school, like I said. So all these things definitely making fun of little old me. Little old me. If you want to appear well read without actually having to read, here's tip number 7. Recommend bookstore cafes. Uh, Not really a great business model for a quarantine pandemic. So if you can order from your local businesses, um, buy a book. Buy a book not from Amazon and not from like your e-reader. A lot of bookstores are doing curbside pickup and stuff, which is awesome. Um, But yeah, once we all get to break out of quarantine and before COVID, bookstore cafes were really hot. So, um, you could pretty much go to one and just sit in it, and you didn't even have to talk about books. People assumed that you just, knew your shit. So you can also put literary quotes on your Instagram. Uh, be mindful of what they imply though, because if you put a Shakespeare quote, that probably implies you have feelings of some kind, um, and that you're basic. Put an Ernest Hemingway quote, that will imply that you're a white man who thinks he has important things to say. And Jane Austen quotes imply that you have a great sense of humor. So be right back that up. I I like Hemingway. I like Hemingway. He just like 100% gives that vibe of like, I'm an important person because society has told me I matter purely based on my skin and my gender. I read his book about like his time in Paris, and it was literally about like how he was so poor because he was trying to be a writer, but his wife absolutely loved it because they were poor, and then the reason he cheated on her was because they were less poor, which made them less happy. And I'm like, your wife did not love sitting by herself in a tiny ass dirty Paris apartment with your newborn baby while you went in cool cafes and like talked to cool artists. Like, I would have been pissed. I would not be nice about that situation. Just saying, I don't know. I gotta read. There's a book out now that's like from, I think, from Hemingway's wife's point of view. I want to check that out. Tip number 9 to appear well read without actually having to read anything. Call a book derivative. Now, since all stories are inspired by thousands of years of human storytelling and at least several hundred years of novels, everything derives somewhat from previous work, so it works for anything. You can be like, no, that's too much like this other thing, and since storytelling is a basic fundamental building block of human consciousness, every story is kind of like every other story, so it's very easy to dismiss things because you think they're cliche. The next one, if you want to appear well read without any effort. Idea number 10, replace the word episodes in your vocabulary with chapters. I got through 23 chapters last Saturday when I was depressed at home. Yes, 23. Only took me 11.5 hours. That sounds a lot better. Then I binge watched Friends again because it's the only place I feel safe.